Caleb, let's begin with this, and that is Tennessee, Kentucky. Wow, with the nation watching, had an opportunity to pound down the Cats, and who knows what could happen if that's a significant victory. And John Calipari seems to be hanging by a string, but instead the Vols gave the Cats a lot of life for a lot of different reasons. I thought the guard play was woeful, as you and I talked about over the weekend. I thought some of the hustle stats in terms of rebounds weren't great, and yeah, I just thought Tennessee, as much as anything, coming down the stretch, still in the game, lacked an awful lot of moxie. Caleb, you have a runner in the lane. It's the guy Ziegler, off balance 3-pointer as a way to try to get back in that game. There was still plenty of time to set up a play and get a score, and suddenly you're tied. And that just seemed way too complicated for Tennessee, and able to do either of those things to set up a play late. I just thought it was a poor outing overall. If we went A to F, I'd go about a D.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one thing I would say is that, like, I don't mind them not setting up a play at the end. I'm kind of a believer in that if you take time to set up a play, you give the other team time to set up their defense. And Calipari is actually a pretty good defensive coach. I do mind the play, Santiago Vescovi just running into the lane and throwing a desperation floater. Here's the thing with the game. Tennessee shot awful from three-point range. That's fine. You can live with that. You're going to have games where you're not on from the three-point line. That's okay. What you can't live with is, you're right, the awful guard play. How many missed layups were in that game? I mean, there were a ton of just missed wide open layups. And then more importantly than that, I think that, like you said, the hustle plays. It reminded me of, we talked about the Tennessee-South Carolina game in football over the weekend. And in that game, yes, there was a Jeremy Banks issue. Yes, there was the secondary was woeful. But the real story was the defensive line just took the day off. And Tennessee, that was a lack of hustle by the defensive line in that game. It's the same under the basket on rebounding in this one. Tennessee got massively out-rebounded on the boards, particularly offensive rebounds. And those were hustle plays. And where you really know they were hustle plays is Tennessee offensive rebounds that aren't based on hustle plays are usually like long bricks, three-pointers that are just bricked back to the offense. Tennessee missed more three-pointers than Kentucky did. So Tennessee had more offensive rebound opportunities, should we say, than Kentucky did. And Kentucky still dominated them on the glass there.
Yeah, they really got beat up on the boards, and I'm really not sure what to think of this team, because it should be at full strength now. There were times where Tennessee was, missing some guys. Vescovi at one point, and there were injuries that they wanted to work through and be careful with. And I know that Rick Barnes likes to toy with the lineup early on, but that was just rather bizarro to me how Tennessee didn't come out and play as well as they could have. You had the Chris Lofton ceremony as well, which, that I know that a lot of these guys probably don't remember Chris Lofton because they're 20 years old or so. But you did have Candace Parker in the house. You did have all of that, and to me, that's plenty of reason to show up, even if you didn't grow up rooting for Chris Lofton. I mean, it was obviously a big deal in Thompson Bowling Arena. So, yeah, I just thought the only word I can think of is a little embarrassing, especially for the guard play and what they did not do on Saturday. I was surprised. I had that game TiVoed. I had a couple of errands to run, and somebody slipped the score in on me, and I was honestly surprised it was close with 5 minutes left, much less, and I went back and watched it on TiVo, much less the fact that Tennessee just got out hustled. If Kentucky comes out, or any team for that matter, it's college basketball, and they're just, they're hitting 18 of 22 from the 3-point line. Basketball is a sport like that. You can lose like that, but Tennessee didn't lose like that. They lost like that just from lack of hustle, and that was befuddling.
Yeah, I agree. I think what it's one of those things, and throughout a college basketball season, 30-game season, it's one of the, you're right, Chris Lofton's number being retired, your Tennessee, your number 5, all the talk about Calipari being on the hot seat, and it's a noon tip-off on a Saturday. It was just one of those games that I'm not so sure they were really that dialed in on, if I'm going to be honest. It was, and I'm maybe that may not be a good sign for March. But you would hope that when NCAA tournament play comes, they're not going to say, "Oh, we just have to get through this game," because that was definitely, I think you saw it too. That was definitely a game where they just didn't really feel like being out there that day, and so
yeah, but that to me though is just, it's Kentucky. I don't care if you're playing Kentucky on June the 28th in a parking lot. It's Tennessee, Kentucky. I think that's a little bit worrisome for what they do moving forward. I'll be honest with you. I think that's very disconcerting.
I mean, I agree. Also, because this is a veteran team, so it's not like there's a bunch of freshmen who don't understand the magnitude of Tennessee, Kentucky. I mean, Vescovi and James have been there for 4 years. So I agree. It is concerning, but I do think it was just one of those games. Those noon tip-offs. It's like a noon kickoff in football. You don't know sometimes what team you're going to get at a noon kickoff in football. And the same, by the way, with like an 8 p.m. kickoff. I mean, we talked about it. The whole reason we think the defensive line didn't play, as you said, with their hair on fire with the South Carolina game, they spent all day being distracted by all these other almost losses, worrying about Tennessee's place in the college football playoff. And then kickoff happens with South Carolina, and they're just not dialed in at all in that game. And
yeah, that I don't understand how you're not dialed in Kentucky, even if that game's 6 a.m. So they'll face Mississippi State tomorrow. Do you see a bounce back game, Caleb, after the disappointment of Saturday?
I don't know if I see I don't know if I see a bounce back game. I see Tennessee winning fairly comfortably, but I would say that it might be still a little sloppy. Win taken out of the sails of the loss, quick turnaround in 3 days. Never been a fan of those Tuesday night games, quite honestly. And Tennessee plays a lot of them now that they're more of a national brand in basketball. I remember the Buzz Peterson years. Tennessee was always one of the Wednesday night games because it's less prime time than it is Tuesday. But now they're always on, it seems like, Tuesday night. And but I think they'll win. I think they'll win comfortably. But
coverage. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I also wanted to give one more shout out to Chris Lofton. I thought about this over the weekend that Rick Barnes and John Calipari, the two coaches going against each other, those are two coaches Chris Lofton torched when he played them back in 2006.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds stupid in some ways, but I almost think Chris Lofton is underrated, even though he just had his number retired. From a national perspective, he was one of the first. I'm not saying he was Steph Curry. He didn't take that deep a three and that sort of thing, but he had the uber quick release, which is why Steph Curry is able to get so many of those shots off that he shouldn't. He also had zero fear. Now, again, he didn't take shots from 8 feet behind the 3-point line, right? But I just thought he was, and give Bruce Pearl a lot of credit. I thought he was part of a game and part of a system that just was a showcase of the evolution of basketball. So around that time, and Bruce Pearl wasn't the only one, but around that time, what was your best shot? Your best shot was a wide open layup. Your second best shot was a contested layup where you get fouled, whether or not you make it. Your third best shot was a 3-pointer. That mid-range crap was out the door. You didn't want any of that because statistically, that's kind of how they figured it out. I thought that was really cool.